In the shadowed halls of Ashbourne Manor, a young heiress, Lady Eleanor, is found dead in a locked room, clutching a broken ebony locket. Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, unravels a web of secrets, love, betrayal, and ambition. A poet's hidden affair, a cousin's ruthless greed, and a maid's fearful silence converge in a chilling mystery. Why was the locket shattered? Who betrayed Eleanor's trust? In just moments, Poirot's little gray cells will expose a killer, revealing a truth as dark as the locket itself. Dive into a tale of passion and deception that will grip you until the final clue. Chapter 1. The Locked Door. The mist hung low over the Sussex countryside, curling around the ancient oaks that lined the drive to Ashbourne Manor. The grand house, with its ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows, loomed like a sentinel in the autumn dusk, its silhouette softened by the fog. Hercule Poirot, stepping from the chauffeured car, adjusted his immaculate overcoat and surveyed the scene with keen, bird-like eyes. He had been persuaded to spend a weekend in this quiet corner of England by his old friend Captain Hastings, who had spoken glowingly of the manor's charm and the hospitality of its young mistress, Lady Eleanor Ashbourne. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his breath visible in the chill air. "You promised me rest, yet I sense already the air of disquiet. This house, it has secrets, none?" Hastings, ever the optimist, chuckled as he hefted their luggage. "Nonsense, Poirot. It's just a bit of fog. Eleanor's a delightful girl, heiress to a fortune, you know. You'll enjoy her company." But as they approached the manor's heavy oak door, it swung open to reveal not the warm welcome Hastings had anticipated, but a scene of barely contained panic. The butler, a stooped man named Withers, stood wringing his hands, his face ashen. "Oh, sir," he stammered, addressing Hastings. "It's dreadful, simply dreadful. Lady Eleanor, she's dead." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his quickening interest. "Dead, you say? Take us to her, monsieur." At once, they were led through a labyrinth of paneled corridors, past portraits of stern-faced Ashbournes glaring down from gilded frames, to a locked door on the second floor. A small crowd had gathered, a housemaid, her eyes red with tears, a young man with disheveled hair and a poet's intensity, and an older woman, her lips pursed in disapproval. The local constable, Grimsby, a lanky man with a nervous tic, was already present, fumbling with a ring of keys. "The door's bolted from the inside, sir," Grimsby said, his voice trembling. "We've not been able to get in. The windows are latched and the chimney's too narrow for a cat. It's impossible." Poirot's green eyes gleamed. "Impossible, Constable Grimsby." "Non, non. What you call impossible is merely the truth dressed in shadows. Open the door, if you please, Withers." Produced a skeleton key, and after a moment's struggle, the lock yielded. The door creaked open, revealing a room frozen in tragedy. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne lay on the Persian rug beside her four-poster bed, her auburn hair fanned out like a halo. Her face, once vibrant, was pale, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Around her neck, faint bruises told a grim tale, but it was her hand that drew Poirot's attention. Clutched tightly in her fingers was a broken ebony locket, its chain tangled and its surface cracked as if struck with force. Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements precise, almost reverent. "Strangulation," he murmured, noting the delicate marks. "And this locket, it is not merely an ornament. It holds a secret, does it not?" Hastings, hovering at his shoulder, shuddered. "Good Lord, Poirot, who could have done this?" The door was bolted, the windows secure. It's like a ghost slipped in and out. Poirot rose, dusting his knees. A ghost, Hastings? Non. The human heart is far more cunning than any spectre. This room? It was locked, oui, but locks are made by men, and men have motives. Grimsby coughed, clutching his notebook. We reckon it happened around midnight, sir. No one heard a thing, or so they say. I've got the household ready for questioning in the drawing room. Very good, Poirot said, his voice crisp. But first, let us observe. The little gray cells, they require details to work their magic. He circled the room, his polished shoes silent on the rug. The windows, as Grimsby had said, were latched, their frames undisturbed. The fireplace was cold, its flue too narrow for entry. The bolt on the door was stiff but intact, and a single key lay on the bedside table, glinting in the lamplight. Poirot paused at Eleanor's writing desk, where a half-finished letter lay, its ink smudged. My dearest, I cannot go on like this. The words trailed off, unfinished. Most curious, Poirot said, tapping his temple. A letter begun, but not completed. A locket broken, but not discarded. And a lady, dead, in a room sealed like a tomb. This is no simple crime, Hastings. This is a performance, staged with care. As they descended to the drawing room, Poirot's mind was already at work, weaving the threads of this grim tableau. The locked door was no barrier to the truth, not when Hercule Poirot's little gray cells were engaged. Chapter 2. The Players in the Drama. The drawing room of Ashbourne Manor was a study in opulence, its walls adorned with tapestries depicting pastoral scenes, their colors muted by time. A fire crackled in the marble hearth, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled household. The air was thick with tension, as if the very furniture, polished mahogany tables, velvet-upholstered chairs, and a grand chandelier dripping with crystal, held its breath. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the room's grandeur. His hands were clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly, as though listening to whispers only he could hear. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood by the window, his honest face creased with concern as he surveyed the three figures seated before them. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice soft, but carrying the weight of authority. We are gathered here not for pleasantries, but to unravel a tragedy. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne is dead, and one among you, or perhaps more than one, knows why. Let us proceed with order and method. The suspects sat in a semicircle, each a portrait of unease. Richard Langley, the poet and Eleanor's lover, lounged in a high-backed chair, his dark curls falling carelessly over his brow. His eyes, a deep blue that might have charmed many, were shadowed with something akin to grief. Or was it fear? He wore a velvet jacket, slightly worn at the cuffs, a testament to his artistic pretensions rather than wealth. Across from him sat Beatrice Ashbourne, Eleanor's cousin, her posture rigid as a governess. Her severe black dress and tightly pinned graying hair gave her the air of a woman who brooked no nonsense, yet her fingers, clasped tightly in her lap, betrayed a nervous energy. Beside her, almost shrinking into the shadows, was Mary Jenkins, the maid, her plain gray uniform and downcast eyes making her seem part of the furniture. Her hands, red from scrubbing, twisted a handkerchief into knots. Constable Grimsby hovered near the door, his pencil poised over his notebook, though his anxious glances suggested he was out of his depth. I've taken their statements, Mr. Poirot, he said, clearing his throat. All claim they were elsewhere when it happened. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as the prelude to a mental dissection. Claim, you say, Constable? Claims are but words, and words are the masks of truth. Let us hear these masks, one by one. He turned first to Richard Langley, whose gaze flickered to the floor before meeting Poirot's. Monsieur Langley, you were the betrothed of Lady Eleanor, oui? Tell me, where were you at midnight, when death came to her door? Richard shifted, his fingers drumming on the armrest. I was in the garden, Mr. Poirot. I often walk there at night. It inspires my poetry. The stars, the silence. Eleanor understood that. His voice, rich with emotion, faltered. I didn't hear anything, didn't see anything. When I returned, the house was quiet. Poirot's eyes narrowed, sharp as a falcon's. The garden, monsieur, is a vast place. Can anyone confirm this nocturnal muse of yours? Richard's jaw tightened. No, I was alone. I needed solitude. Solitude, Poirot repeated as if tasting the word. A convenient companion, non? We shall return to you, monsieur. He pivoted to Beatrice Ashbourne, whose lips pursed at the attention. Madame, you are the cousin of the deceased, and I understand, the next in line to inherit this estate. Your whereabouts, if you please? Beatrice's voice was crisp, each word clipped like a gardener's shears. I was in the library, Mr. Poirot, reviewing estate accounts. Eleanor was careless with money. Someone had to ensure the family's legacy wasn't squandered. Her eyes flicked to Richard, a flash of disdain passing over her features. I retired to my room around 11 and heard nothing until the maid's screams this morning. Poirot tilted his head. The library. It is on the ground floor, oui? Far from Lady Eleanor's room, yet not so far that a cry might go unnoticed. You are certain you heard nothing? Quite certain, Beatrice replied, her tone daring contradiction. I am not given to flights of fancy, Mr. Poirot. I deal in facts. Facts, Poirot mused, are the skeleton of truth, but it is the flesh of motive we seek. Très bien, madame, finally. He turned to Mary Jenkins, who seemed to shrink further into her chair. Mademoiselle Jenkins, you are the maid, the eyes and ears of this house. Non? Where were you when your mistress met her fate? Mary's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes fixed on the floor. In the kitchen, sir. I was polishing the silver for tomorrow's breakfast. I didn't know anything was wrong until I went upstairs this morning and found... She choked back a sob, her handkerchief a crumpled ball. Poirot's tone softened, but his gaze remained piercing. The kitchen, mademoiselle, is a busy place, yet you heard no disturbance? No footsteps, no cries? No, sir, Mary said, her voice trembling. It was quiet. I swear it. Poirot nodded, stepping back to survey the trio. 3 alibis, each as delicate as a spider's web. And yet, one of you, or perhaps more, has woven a lie. Let us examine these threads closely. Hastings, unable to contain himself, leaned forward. Poirot, they all seem plausible, but none can be verified. It's maddening. And that locked door, how could anyone have got in? Poirot raised a finger, his eyes twinkling with that peculiar light that signaled his mind was racing. Patience, Hastings. The locked door is but a detail, a flourish in the killer's performance. We must look to the hearts of these players, for it is there we will find the truth. He began to pace, his polished shoes clicking softly on the parquet floor. Monsieur Langley, your love for Lady Eleanor was well known, yet love, it can be a tempest, non? A passion that burns too brightly may consume. Madame Ashbourne, Your devotion to the estate is admirable, but ambition, it can blind even the most prudent. And you, Mademoiselle Jenkins, your loyalty is touching, but fear can silence even the most honest tongue. The room grew still, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Richard's fingers stopped their restless drumming. Beatrice's hands tightened in her lap, and Mary's handkerchief seemed on the verge of tearing. Grimsby scribbled furiously, as if trying to capture the tension itself. Poirot stopped pacing and faced them again. "Let us consider the locket, this ebony enigma found in Lady Eleanor's hand. It was broken, oui, but not by accident. Its destruction was an act of intent, a message, perhaps, or a concealment. Who among you knew of this locket? Speak." Richard cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. "It was a gift from me. I gave it to Eleanor last Christmas. It had a portrait inside, of us together. She wore it always." Beatrice snorted softly. "A sentimental trinket. Eleanor was foolish to cherish such things when the estate was crumbling." Mary said nothing, her eyes darting between the others as if afraid to speak. Poirot noted this, his mind cataloguing her silence as carefully as their words. "A portrait, you say, Monsieur Langley?" Poirot's voice was deceptively mild. And yet the portrait was torn, the locket cracked. Why destroy such a token of love? Unless perhaps it was no longer love that bound you to her. Richard flushed, his hands clenching. "I told you, I was in the garden. I didn't touch her." Poirot raised an eyebrow but said nothing, turning instead to Beatrice. "Madame, you disapproved of Lady Eleanor's choices, no? Her spending, her lover. Did these things threaten your vision for Ashbourne Manor?" Beatrice's eyes flashed. "Eleanor was a child playing at being mistress of this house. I advised her, yes, but I did not harm her. I had no need to. She was digging her own grave with her recklessness." "And you, Mademoiselle Jenkins?" Poirot's gaze softened, but his question was sharp. "Did Lady Eleanor confide in you about this locket, or perhaps about her fears?" Mary hesitated, her lips trembling. She was kind to me, sir. She never spoke of the locket, but she was worried lately. I don't know why. She'd pace her room at night, sometimes crying." Poirot nodded, filing this away. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your honesty, it is a candle in the dark." He turned to Grimsby, who looked increasingly overwhelmed. "Constable, ensure that no one leaves this house until we have spoken again. The truth, it is like a shy bird. It must be coaxed, not chased." Grimsby nodded, scribbling a final note. "Yes, sir." "I'll have my men watch the doors." As the suspects were dismissed, Richard lingered, his eyes searching Poirot's face. "You think I did it, don't you?" "You're wrong, Mr. Poirot. I loved her." Poirot's expression was unreadable. "Love, monsieur, is a motive as powerful as hate. We shall see Beatrice swept out without a backward glance, her heels clicking like a metronome. Mary followed, her head bowed, her handkerchief now a sodden rag. Hastings watched them go, then turned to Poirot. "What do you make of them, old chap?" Richard's story about the garden seems flimsy, and Beatrice, well, she's cold as ice. But the maid? She's terrified, but I can't see her strangling anyone. Poirot smiled, a small enigmatic curve of his lips. "You see, Hastings, but you do not observe. Each of them wears a mask, but the cracks are there. Richard's passion, it hides something, guilt, perhaps, or a secret he fears to reveal. Beatrice's ambition is a fire that burns beneath her calm. And Mary, her fear is not merely of this moment, but of something she knows or saw." He moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. The locket, Hastings. It is the key. Its destruction was no accident. It was a message or a desperate act to hide the truth. We must learn what it contained and why it was broken. Hastings frowned, his practical mind struggling with the puzzle. But the locked door, Poirot. Even if one of them did it, how did they get in and out? The bolt was secure. The key inside Poirot's eyes gleamed. The door, mon ami, is a distraction. The truth lies not in the mechanics, but in the human heart. Who did Eleanor trust enough to let into her room at midnight? Who had reason to break her locket and her life? He straightened, adjusting his tie with a precise flick. Come, Hastings. We shall walk the garden where Monsieur Langley claims to have been. The stars, they may not speak, but the earth, it keeps its secrets poorly. As they stepped into the cool night air, the mist swirling around their ankles, Poirot's mind was already weaving a tapestry of clues. The players in this drama had spoken, but their words were only the opening act. The truth, he knew, would reveal itself through the little gray cells, and the shadows of Ashbourne Manor would soon yield their secrets. Chapter 3. The Broken Locket. The morning sun pierced the mist that clung to Ashbourne Manor, casting long shadows across the polished oak floor of Lady Eleanor's bedroom. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes darting over every detail with the precision of a watchmaker. The air still held the faint scent of Eleanor's lavender perfume, now mingled with the metallic tang of tragedy. Captain Hastings hovered near the door, his face a mixture of awe and unease as he watched Poirot at work. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but resonant. "This room, it is a canvas painted with the strokes of a crime. We must read its colors carefully." He knelt beside the body, now covered with a sheet at Constable Grimsby's insistence, though Poirot had insisted on one final examination before the coroner's arrival. His gloved fingers lifted the sheet, revealing Eleanor's pale hand, still clutching the broken ebony locket. The locket, no larger than a walnut, was a thing of exquisite craftsmanship, its surface inlaid with a delicate filigree of silver. Yet it was marred by a jagged crack, as if struck with deliberate force, and the chain was twisted, caught in her fingers like a final accusation. "This locket," Poirot murmured, "it is not merely a trinket. It is a witness, Hastings. Why was it broken? What did it conceal that the killer could not allow to be seen?" Hastings leaned closer, squinting at the object. "It's a fine piece, Poirot, but it's just jewelry. Perhaps it broke in a struggle." Poirot's mustache twitched with a hint of impatience. "No, Hastings. You see, but you do not observe. The crack, it is too precise, too intentional. And the chain, see how it is twisted, not torn. This was no accident of struggle. It was an act of purpose." He gently pried the locket from Eleanor's grasp, holding it to the light. The hinges were sprung, revealing a compartment within. A tiny portrait, no bigger than a postage stamp, lay inside, torn cleanly in two. One half showed a fragment of a face, Eleanor's, perhaps, though the features were obscured by the tear. The other half was missing, as if spirited away by the killer. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A portrait, torn and incomplete. This locket held a secret, Hastings, one the murderer wished to obliterate. But secrets, they are stubborn things. They leave traces. At that moment, Doctor Hargrove, the coroner, bustled into the room, his round face flushed from the cold morning air. He was a stout man, his waistcoat straining slightly, with a brisk manner that suggested efficiency but little imagination. "Mr. Poirot," he said, adjusting his spectacles, "I've examined the body. Death by strangulation, no question. The bruises on her neck are consistent with hands, strong hands, I'd say. No other marks, save for the locket's chain, which seems to have caught in her fingers. She died around midnight, give or take an hour." Poirot nodded, his gaze still fixed on the locket. "And the absence of struggle, Doctor? What does that suggest to you?" Hargrove frowned, stroking his chin. "Odd, I'll grant you. No scratches, no defensive wounds. She didn't fight back. Either she was taken by surprise, or she knew her killer, trusted them enough to let them close." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice soft but triumphant. "Trust, it is the key to this locked room. She opened her door to someone, or they were already within. And this locket, its destruction tells us the killer feared its contents. Hastings, ever practical, gestured to the room. But Poirot, the door was bolted from the inside. The key was here, on the bedside table. How could anyone have left after doing it?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "The door, Hastings, is a distraction. It is not the how that matters most, but the why. The locket, the trust, the motive. These are the threads we must follow." He moved to the writing desk, where the half-finished letter still lay, its ink smudged as if Eleanor's hand had faltered mid-sentence. "My dearest, I cannot go on like this." The words hung in the air, a fragment of a confession or a plea. Poirot traced the paper with a gloved finger, noting its fine quality, the elegant curve of Eleanor's handwriting. "This letter," he said, "it was written to someone close, someone who stirred her heart to turmoil. But who? And why was it abandoned?" Dr. Hargrove coughed, eager to return to his duties. "I'll need to take the body for further examination, Mr. Poirot. Anything else you require?" Poirot waved a hand dismissively. "For now, Doctor, you have confirmed what my little gray cells suspected. Go, but leave the locket with me. It has more to tell." As Hargrove and his assistants prepared to remove the body, Poirot turned his attention to the room itself. The bed was neatly made, save for a slight rumple where Eleanor had fallen. A silver hairbrush lay on the dressing table, its bristles holding a few auburn strands. A vase of late roses stood by the window, their petals wilting, as if mourning their mistress. The windows, as Grimsby had noted, were latched, their frames free of tampering. The fireplace was cold, its ashes undisturbed. Poirot paused at the bedside table, where the key to the room rested beside a crystal glass, empty but for a faint ring of residue. He sniffed it delicately. Water, perhaps, or something stronger. We shall see. Hastings, growing restless, paced the room. "It's maddening, Poirot. The locket, the letter, the locked door. It's all so theatrical. Like something out of one of Richard's poems." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Theatrical, you say?" "Oui, Hastings. You are closer to the truth than you know. This crime, it is a performance, staged with care. The killer wished us to see the locked room, the broken locket, the silent death. But they forgot one thing. Hercule Poirot does not applaud a performance until he understands its script." He slipped the locket into a small evidence envelope, tucking it into his pocket. "Come, Hastings. We must speak with the household again, but first let us visit the garden where Monsieur Langley claims to have wandered. The earth, it may hold clues. The stars did not share." They descended the grand staircase, passing a portrait of Eleanor in her youth, her eyes bright with promise. Poirot paused, his expression softening. A life extinguished, Hastings. And for what? A secret, a betrayal, a greed. We shall find out, for her sake. Outside, the garden was a maze of yew hedges and gravel paths, the air sharp with the scent of damp leaves. Poirot moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the ground. Near a stone bench, he stopped, crouching to examine a patch of earth. See here, Hastings. Footprints, fresh from last night. A man's boot, oui, but the pattern is uneven, as if he lingered, perhaps watching the house. Hastings peered over his shoulder. Richards, do you think? He said he was out here. Perhaps, Poirot said, straightening. But footprints, they tell us only where someone stood, not why. We must dig deeper, into the heart of this mystery. As they returned to the manor, the sound of a distant church bell tolled, a mournful note in the still air. Poirot's mind was a whirl of connections, the locket, the letter, the trust betrayed. The broken locket was more than a clue, it was a challenge, and Hercule Poirot was never one to shy from a challenge. Chapter 4. The Lover's Secret. The late morning light filtered through the tall windows of Ashbourne Manor's library, casting a golden glow over shelves laden with leather-bound volumes. Hercule Poirot stood before a towering bookcase, his gloved finger tracing the spine of a dusty tome on botany, though his mind was far from the study of plants. Captain Hastings, restless as ever, paced near a mahogany table strewn with estate ledgers, his brow furrowed with the weight of the morning's discoveries. "Poirot," Hastings said, pausing to adjust his tie. "That locket business is peculiar, I'll grant you, but I can't shake the feeling that Richard Langley's hiding something. Did you see how he flinched when you mentioned the portrait?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, a spark of amusement beneath his grave demeanor. "Mon ami, your instincts, they are like a hound that smells the fox but has not yet found its den. Oui, Monsieur Langley conceals something, and we shall uncover it with method." The library door creaked open, and Richard Langley entered, summoned by Poirot's request. His poet's air was frayed, his velvet jacket rumpled, his dark curls more disordered than before. He carried himself with the defiance of a man cornered, yet his blue eyes held a flicker of something softer, perhaps grief, perhaps guilt. "Monsieur Langley," Poirot began, his voice smooth as polished marble, "you have told us you were in the garden at midnight, seeking inspiration under the stars. A romantic notion, non? But the heart, it is not always romantic. It is often secretive. Tell me, what did you argue with Lady Eleanor about yesterday evening?" Richard's shoulders stiffened, his hands clenching at his sides. "It was nothing, Mr. Poirot. A lover's quarrel, as I said. Eleanor was upset about my writing, my time away. She wanted more of me than I could give." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache a perfect curve of skepticism. "More of you, monsieur? Or perhaps she wanted the truth. The locket she clutched, it contained a portrait, torn in two. A portrait of you, perhaps, or of another. What did she know that made her so upset?" Richard's face paled, his lips parting as if to protest, but no words came. He sank into a chair, his hands covering his face for a moment, before he looked up, his voice low. "I loved Eleanor, Mr. Poirot, I swear it. Yes, we argued, but it was about trivial things, my late nights, her jealousy. Nothing worth this." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, his green eyes piercing through the poet's defenses. "Trivial, you say? Yet a woman is dead, her locket broken, her letter unfinished. My dearest, I cannot go on like this." Those were her words, monsieur. To whom were they written, if not to you? Richard's hands trembled, and he looked away, toward the window where the garden lay bathed in sunlight. "I don't know," he whispered. "She didn't show me any letter. She was distant lately, yes, but I thought it was just her moods. She was always so intense." Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft but cutting. "Intense or betrayed? There are whispers, Monsieur Langley, in the village. Whispers of a man seen with a woman, not Lady Eleanor, at the Black Swan Inn. A woman with dark hair, cloaked in secrecy. Was this you, monsieur?" Richard's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. "Who told you that?" "It's a lie. I was never—" He stopped, his breath ragged. "It was nothing, Mr. Poirot. A misunderstanding. I met a friend, a writer, to discuss poetry. That's all. A friend," Poirot repeated, his tone heavy with doubt. "And this friend, she has a name. Oui?" Richard hesitated, his fingers twisting the cuff of his jacket. "Clara. Clara Marsden. She's a poet like me. We met to share verses, nothing more. Eleanor knew about her, but she didn't understand." Poirot's mustache twitched, a silent signal of his mental gears turning. "Clara Marsden, you say? And where might we find this poetess to confirm your literary rendezvous?" "She's gone," Richard said quickly, too quickly. "Back to London, I think." "I don't know her address." "Convenient?" Poirot murmured, exchanging a glance with Hastings, who raised an eyebrow. "Very well, Monsieur Langley. For now, you may go, but do not leave the manor. The truth, it has a way of finding those who hide it." As Richard left, his footsteps echoing down the corridor, Hastings turned to Poirot. "He's lying, isn't he? That business about a poet friend, it's flimsy as tissue paper." Poirot nodded, moving to the window to gaze at the garden. "Oui, Hastings. His words, they are like a poem. Beautiful, but not necessarily true. This Clara Marsden, if she exists, is a thread we must pull. But first, we must verify his movements." They stepped into the garden, the gravel crunching underfoot as they retraced the path to the stone bench where Poirot had found footprints the previous night. The earth was still soft from recent rain, and the prints remained clear. A man's boot, size 10, with a distinctive wear on the left heel. Poirot knelt, his gloved hands hovering over the marks. "These prints, Hastings, they are indeed those of a man who lingered. See how the heel is pressed deeper here, as if he stood for some time, perhaps watching the house. But look, there is another set, fainter, leading toward the rose arbor." Hastings squinted, barely discerning the second set of tracks. "A woman's, perhaps? Smaller. Lighter? Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes scanning the arbor's tangled vines. "Or a man who treads lightly. We must compare these to Monsieur Langley's boots, and perhaps to others in the household." They returned to the manor, where Constable Grimsby awaited them in the hall, his notebook now a crumpled mess of scribbles. "Mr. Poirot, I've checked with the staff. No one saw Mr. Langley in the garden last night, but the cook says she saw a light in the library window around 11, so Miss Beatrice's story holds for now." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing this detail. "And Mademoiselle Jenkins?" "What of her?" Grimsby flushed. "She's been crying all morning, sir. Says she was in the kitchen, like she told you. The scullery maid confirms it, but she was asleep by 11, so she can't say if Mary stayed there all night." "Merci, Constable," Poirot said, dismissing him with a wave. "The kitchen, the library, the garden, each a stage, but the performance is incomplete. We must find this Clara Marsden, and we must learn what Eleanor knew that made her write that letter. Hastings, ever eager for action, suggested, "Shall I go to the Black Swan Inn? See if the innkeeper knows anything about this mysterious woman." Poirot's smile was approving. "An excellent idea, Hastings. But be discreet. The village, it has ears, and we do not wish to startle our fox before we see its tail." As Hastings departed for the village, Poirot returned to the library, his thoughts circling back to Richard's reaction. The poet's panic at the mention of Clara Marsden had been palpable, a crack in his carefully crafted facade. Poirot opened the estate ledgers on the table, flipping through pages of meticulous figures, but his mind was elsewhere. The locket, the letter, the footprints, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Richard Langley was at its center. He paused at a photograph on the mantel, a candid image of Eleanor and Richard at a garden party, her smile radiant, his arm around her waist. Yet there was something in his eyes, even in the photograph, a shadow, a hint of distraction. Poirot's fingers tapped his temple, his little gray cells working furiously. "The lover's secret," he murmured. "It is not merely an affair, no. It is a motive, wrapped in the guise of love. But what did Eleanor discover, and why did it cost her life?" As the clock struck noon, the manor seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Poirot to unravel its secrets. The lover's tale was unraveling, but the truth remained just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of Ashbourne Manor. Chapter 5. The Cousin's Ambition. The afternoon sun hung low over Ashbourne Manor, its rays slanting through the tall windows of the library, where Hercule Poirot sat at a polished mahogany desk, his gloved hands steepled before him. The room, with its towering shelves and the faint, musty scent of old books, seemed to hum with secrets, as if the very walls were whispering. Captain Hastings had not yet returned from his errand to the Black Swan Inn, and Poirot used the quiet to reflect on the threads of the case, the broken locket, the unfinished letter, the footprints in the garden. But now his attention turned to Beatrice Ashbourne, the cousin whose sharp tongue and sharper gaze suggested a mind as calculating as it was resolute. "Mon ami," Poirot said to the empty room, his voice a soft murmur. "Ambition. It is a fire that warms or consumes. Let us see which it is for Madame Ashbourne." He rose, adjusting his immaculate tie, and made his way to the drawing-room, where Beatrice had agreed to meet him. The room was as grand as ever, its tapestries glowing in the fading light, but the atmosphere was heavy with suspicion. Beatrice sat in a high-backed chair, her black dress severe against the plush velvet, her graying hair pulled tightly into a bun. Her hands, folded in her lap, were steady, but her eyes, cool and assessing, followed Poirot's every move. "Madame Ashbourne," Poirot began, settling into a chair opposite her, "you have been most forthcoming about your presence in the library last night, reviewing the estate accounts. A diligent task, non? But I wonder, why such urgency at such a late hour?" Beatrice's lips thinned, her voice crisp as frost. "Mr. Poirot, someone had to keep this estate from ruin. Eleanor was a dreamer, scattering money on frivolous pursuits and that poet of hers. I was ensuring our legacy survived her recklessness." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his interest. "A legacy, oui, but one you stand to inherit, do you not? With Lady Eleanor gone, Ashbourne Manor falls to you. A powerful motive, perhaps, for one so devoted to its preservation." Beatrice's eyes flashed, but her composure held. "You mistake duty for greed, Mr. Poirot. I loved Eleanor despite her follies. I had no need to hasten her departure. Time and her own poor choices were doing that well enough." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And yet, madame, the accounts you reviewed, they tell a story, non? May I see them?" Beatrice hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing her face before she nodded. "They're in the library. I'll fetch them." "No need," Poirot said, rising with a fluid grace. "We shall go together." The little gray cells, they prefer to see things in their natural setting. They crossed the manor's echoing corridors, passing portraits of long-dead Ashbournes, whose stern gazes seemed to judge the living. In the library, Beatrice led Poirot to the desk, where a ledger lay open, its pages filled with neat columns of figures. Poirot's eyes scanned the entries, noting sums paid to creditors, repairs deferred, and a troubling number of withdrawals labeled simply personal. "Eleanor's extravagance," Beatrice said, her voice tinged with disdain. "She spent thousands on dresses, parties, and gifts for that Langley fellow. The estate was bleeding dry." Poirot nodded, flipping to a page marked with a recent date. "And here, madame, a note about a potential sale of land. To a developer, oui? A significant sum, but one that would diminish the estate's grandeur. Was this your plan, or Eleanor's?" Beatrice's hands tightened, her knuckles whitening. "It was my suggestion." Eleanor resisted. She was sentimental about the land, said it was her heritage. But we needed the funds. She didn't understand the burden of maintaining this place. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A burden or an opportunity? To sell, to profit, to secure your future, perhaps at the cost of Eleanor's life? Beatrice stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "That's outrageous, Mr. Poirot. I am no murderer. I wanted to save this estate, not destroy it." "Calm yourself, madame," Poirot said, his voice soothing but firm. "I accuse no one, yet. But the truth, it is like a shadow. It moves with the light of evidence." As Beatrice sat, her composure fraying, Poirot's attention was drawn to the fireplace, where a faint wisp of ash caught his eye. He crossed to it, kneeling to examine the grate. Among the cinders lay a fragment of paper, its edges charred but a few words still legible. "Must sell. No other way." The handwriting was Beatrice's, sharp and precise. Poirot held up the fragment, his expression unreadable. "This, madame, is yours, I presume? A letter, perhaps, or a note. Why burn it, unless it held something you wished to hide?" Beatrice's face paled, but she recovered quickly. "A draft, nothing more. I was calculating figures, weighing options. It's no crime to plan for the future." "No crime," Poirot agreed, slipping the fragment into an envelope. "But perhaps a clue. We shall see." At that moment, the library door opened, and Hastings burst in, his face flushed with excitement. "Poirot, I've got something." The innkeeper at the Black Swan confirmed it. "Richard was there 3 nights ago with a woman, dark-haired, just as you suspected. The innkeeper overheard her call him darling, and they seemed close." Poirot's eyes sparkled. "Excellent work, Hastings. This Clara Marsden, she is no mere poet, it seems. We must find her, but first, Madame Ashbourne, you may go. Do not leave the manor." Beatrice rose, her movements stiff, and swept out of the room, leaving a chill in her wake. Hastings watched her go, then turned to Poirot. "She's a cold one, Poirot. Do you think she's involved?" Poirot tapped his temple, his mind racing. "Beatrice Ashbourne, she is a woman of ambition, Hastings, But ambition alone does not strangle. This letter fragment, it suggests desperation, perhaps a plan to pressure Eleanor. But murder? We need more. He moved to the window, gazing at the garden where the footprints had been found. The lover's secret, the cousin's ambition, they are threads in a tapestry, but the pattern is not yet clear. The locket, the letter, the locked room, they point to a heart betrayed. But whose? Hastings frowned, his practical mind grappling with the puzzle. Beatrice had motive, Poirot. The estate, the money, she'd gain it all. And that burned note, it's suspicious. Oui, Poirot said, but suspicion is not proof. We must test her alibi further. The library window, it faces the garden. If she was here at 11, as she claims, perhaps she saw something, or someone. They returned to the garden, examining the library window from the outside. The gravel path beneath showed no clear footprints, but a faint scuff mark caught Poirot's eye, as if someone had brushed against the wall. Interesting, he murmured. Not enough for proof, but enough for questions. As they walked back to the manor, Poirot's thoughts turned to the locket, still in his pocket. Its broken state, the torn portrait, the twisted chain. They were not random. They were a message, a desperate act to obscure a truth. Beatrice's ambition was a piece of the puzzle, but it was Richard's secret, and perhaps Mary's silence that would complete the picture. The manor loomed before them, its windows like eyes watching their progress. Poirot paused, his gaze distant. The cousin's ambition, Hastings, it is a flame that burns bright, but is it the flame that consumed Eleanor? Or is it merely a spark in a greater fire? We shall find out, with method and order. Chapter 6. The Maid's Fear. The late afternoon light cast a somber glow over Ashbourne Manor, its rays filtering through the heavy drapes of the servants' quarters, where Hercule Poirot had requested to meet Mary Jenkins. The small, sparsely furnished room was a stark contrast to the manor's opulent grandeur, with only a narrow bed, a chipped washstand, and a single chair squeezed against a wall adorned with faded wallpaper. Mary stood by the window, her thin frame almost blending into the shadows, her hands clutching a worn handkerchief as if it were a lifeline. Her gray uniform was pristine, but her eyes, red-rimmed and wide with apprehension, betrayed a turmoil that no amount of starch could conceal. Captain Hastings, standing near the door, shifted uncomfortably, his usual bluff, cheer subdued by the maid's evident distress. "Poor girl looks terrified, Poirot," he whispered. "Can't imagine she's got the strength to strangle anyone." Poirot, seated in the chair with his hands folded neatly in his lap, regarded Mary with a gaze that was both gentle and unrelenting. "Mademoiselle Jenkins," he began, his voice soft as velvet, yet carrying a weight that commanded attention. "You have told us you were in the kitchen last night, polishing silver, a task most diligent. But the heart, it speaks louder than words. And yours, I see, is heavy with fear. Tell me, what is it you know that makes you tremble so?" Mary's fingers tightened around the handkerchief, twisting it into a knot. "I don't know anything, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was in the kitchen, like I said. I didn't hear nothing, didn't see nothing, until I found her this morning." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his skepticism. "Nothing, mademoiselle?" "Non, non. The eyes, they betray you. They dart, they flinch, as if they have seen something they wish to forget. You were fond of Lady Eleanor, oui? She was kind to you, perhaps more than others in this house. Why, then, do you hold back?" Mary's gaze dropped to the floor, her shoulders hunching as if to ward off his words. "She was kind, sir," she admitted, her voice trembling. "She gave me a shawl once, when I was cold. Said I was like a sister to her in a way, but I swear I didn't do her harm. I'd never." Poirot leaned forward, his green eyes piercing through the dim light. "I do not accuse you of her death, mademoiselle. But silence, it can be as dangerous as a lie. Did you hear something last night? Perhaps? A sound, a voice, a footstep in the night?" Mary hesitated, her breath catching. For a moment it seemed she might collapse under the weight of her fear, but Poirot's steady gaze held her, coaxing the truth like a flame drawing a moth. I did hear something, sir," she said at last, her voice barely audible. "A cry, muffled like, from upstairs. It was late, past midnight. I thought it was just the wind, or maybe Lady Eleanor having a bad dream. I didn't dare go up. Mrs. Ashbourne, she'd have my place if I left my work." Poirot nodded, his expression one of quiet triumph. "A cry, you say? And yet you did not investigate? Why, mademoiselle, when you knew your mistress was troubled?" Mary's eyes filled with tears, spilling over onto her pale cheeks. "I was afraid, sir. This house? It's full of eyes, watching, judging. I'm just a maid. If I meddled, I'd be out on the street with no reference. Lady Eleanor, she was kind, but she was in a state lately, pacing, talking to herself. I thought she'd be all right by morning." Hastings, unable to contain himself, stepped forward. "Good heavens, Mary, why didn't you say this earlier? A cry could have been the murder itself." Poirot raised a hand, silencing his friend. "Patience, Hastings. Mademoiselle Jenkins speaks now because she trusts, or because her fear of silence outweighs her fear of speaking. Tell me, mademoiselle, this cry, where did it come from? Lady Eleanor's room, precisely?" Mary nodded, wiping her eyes with the handkerchief. "I think so, sir. It was faint, but it came from that part of the house. I can't be sure, though. I was so scared I just kept polishing, trying to forget it." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was racing, weaving this new thread into the tapestry of the case. "And did you see anyone, mademoiselle? Monsieur Langley, perhaps, returning from his poetic wanderings? Or Madame Ashbourne, leaving her ledgers in the library?" Mary shook her head vigorously. "No, sir. The kitchen's at the back, far from the main stairs. I didn't see anyone till morning, when I went up to bring Lady Eleanor her tea." Poirot leaned back, his fingers tapping lightly on the arm of the chair. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your honesty, it is a step toward justice. But tell me one thing more. Did Lady Eleanor ever speak to you of the locket, the ebony one she held in death?" Mary's eyes widened, as if the question had struck a nerve. She mentioned it once, sir, a few weeks ago. Said it was special, a gift from someone she loved. She'd touch it sometimes when she was thinking, like it gave her comfort. But she never showed me what was inside." Poirot nodded, filing this away. "Very well, mademoiselle. You may go, but remain in the manor. The truth, it is close now, and you may yet help us find it." Mary curtsied, her movements jerky, and fled the room, her footsteps echoing down the narrow servants' corridor. Hastings watched her go, his face a mixture of pity and frustration. "Poor thing scared out of her wits, Poirot. But that cry, she heard the murder, didn't she? Why didn't she act?" Poirot rose, adjusting his cuffs with precision. "Fear, Hastings. It is a chain stronger than iron, Mademoiselle Jenkins is a servant, dependent on this house for her livelihood. To act, to speak, is to risk everything. But her words, they confirm the time of death, past midnight in Eleanor's room. And they tell us something more. The killer was swift, the cry muffled. This was no prolonged struggle. He moved to the window, pulling back the drape to gaze at the garden beyond. The rose arbor, where he had found the faint second set of footprints, was just visible, its vines tangled in the fading light. The cry, the locket, the locked door, he murmured. They point to a moment of intimacy, of trust betrayed. But whose trust, and why the locket's destruction? Hastings joined him, his practical mind grappling with the puzzle. Mary's story fits with the coroner's report. Midnight, strangulation, no struggle. But it doesn't get us closer to how the killer got in or out. That bolted door, Poirot, it's driving me mad. Poirot's smile was enigmatic, a flicker of amusement in his grave demeanor. The door, mon ami, is a stage prop, nothing more. The killer did not need to break it, for Eleanor let them in. The question is not how, but who, and why they feared the locket's secret. He turned from the window, his mind already racing ahead. Come, Hastings. We must speak with the scullery maid to confirm Mary's presence in the kitchen. And then we must learn more of this Clara Marsden, the poetess who haunts Monsieur Langley's alibi. The maid's fear, it is a piece of the puzzle, but the picture is not yet complete. They left the servants' quarters, descending to the kitchen, where the air was thick with the scent of baking bread and polished metal. The scullery maid, a stout girl named Annie, was scrubbing pots, her hands red from the work. She looked up, startled, as Poirot and Hastings entered. "Annie, is it?" Poirot said, his voice gentle but commanding. "You were in the kitchen last night, with Mademoiselle Jenkins?" Annie nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Aye, sir. Mary was there, polishing silver till late. I went to bed around 11, though. She was still at it when I left." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you heard nothing? No cry? No footsteps?" Annie shook her head. "Nothing, sir. The kitchen's far from the main house, and I sleep heavy. Mary was quiet, though, like she was worried. She's been jumpy lately." "Jumpy, you say?" Poirot pressed. "How so?" Annie shrugged, uneasy under his gaze. "Just nervous, sir. Kept looking at the door like she expected someone. I thought it was just her way. She's always been a bit timid." Poirot thanked her, his mind cataloging this new detail. Mary's fear, her jumpiness, her silence, they suggested she knew more than she had admitted, perhaps something she had seen or overheard. As they left the kitchen, Hastings voiced his thoughts. "Mary's holding something back, Poirot. She's too scared to tell the whole truth. Oui," Poirot said, his voice low. "But fear, it is a guide as well as a chain. It points us to what the killer wishes to hide. We must tread carefully, Hastings, for the truth is close, and the killer knows it." As they returned to the main house, the manor's shadows seemed to deepen, each corridor a silent witness to the tragedy. Poirot's little gray cells were at work, weaving the maid's fear into the tapestry of clues, the locket, the letter, the footprints, the cry. The puzzle was taking shape, and the truth, like a shy bird, was beginning to emerge from the shadows. Chapter 7. The Mechanics of the Lock. The evening shadows stretched long across Ashbourne Manor, cloaking its ancient walls in a somber hush as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings returned to Lady Eleanor's bedroom. The room, now stripped of its tragic occupant, felt hollow, its air heavy with the echo of violence. The four-poster bed stood undisturbed, its silken coverlet smoothed by a servant's hand, and the vase of wilting roses by the window lent a faint, mournful scent. Poirot's polished shoes clicked softly on the oak floor as he approached the door, his eyes fixed on the sturdy brass bolt that had confounded the investigation. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a measured cadence in the quiet. "This locked door, it is the stage upon which our killer has played a clever trick, but tricks, they are illusions, and Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived." Hastings, standing by the bedside table, where the solitary key still rested, ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "I don't see how, Poirot." The bolt was secure, the key inside, the windows latched. It's as if the murderer vanished into thin air. Poirot's mustache twitched, a glimmer of amusement beneath his grave demeanor. "Vanished, Hastings?" "Non, non. The truth does not vanish. It hides in plain sight. Let us examine this lock, this barrier that seems so impenetrable." He knelt before the door, his gloved fingers tracing the bolt's mechanism. The brass was polished but stiff, requiring a firm hand to slide it back and forth. Poirot tested it, noting the faint resistance, the slight creak of metal on metal. "Simple, yet effective," he murmured. "A bolt that locks from within, a key that remains." And yet the killer left no trace of entry or exit. Hastings joined him, peering at the mechanism. Could it have been tampered with? A string, perhaps, to pull the bolt from outside? Poirot shook his head, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the puzzle. A string, Hastings? Too crude, too risky. The killer is cleverer than that. Observe the bolt. Its movement is smooth, its surface unmarred. No scratches, no signs of force. The door was locked by human hand, not by trickery. He rose, moving to the windows, which were as Constable Grimsby had described, latched securely, their frames untouched by tool or force. The chimney, narrow and soot-stained, offered no passage for even the slimmest intruder. Poirot's gaze returned to the room, sweeping over the furniture, the rug, the desk where the unfinished letter lay. "My dearest, I cannot go on like this." The words lingered in his mind, a thread yet to be woven into the tapestry. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with exasperation, "if the door wasn't tampered with, and no one could have climbed in, then how? Eleanor let the killer in, you said, but how did they lock the door behind them?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic, a flicker of triumph in his green eyes. "The how, Hastings, is secondary to the why. The locked door is a distraction, a flourish to make us marvel at the impossible. But the impossible is merely the possible, misunderstood. Eleanor opened her door to someone she trusted, someone who knew her habits, her heart. The bolt was locked after her death by a hand that knew its place." Hastings frowned, his practical mind struggling to keep pace. "You mean the killer was still in the room when Mary found her?" "But that's absurd. There was no one here." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "No one was here when Mary arrived. But the killer, they were not a ghost. They left, and the door was locked to conceal their path. We must look not at the lock, but at the mind behind it." He moved to the bedside table, lifting the key with a delicate touch. It was heavy, its ornate design matching the door's lock perfectly. Poirot turned it in his fingers, noting its weight, its cool surface. "This key," he said, "it was left here as if to taunt us. But why leave it? To suggest no one could have taken it, perhaps, or to point us to a truth we have not yet seen. Hastings, growing restless, paced the room. It's all so maddening, Poirot. The locket, the letter, the cry Mary heard, and now this blasted lock. It's like a riddle wrapped in a mystery. What about Richard's affair? Or Beatrice's plans to sell the estate? Surely one of them is the key to this. Poirot raised a finger, his expression one of quiet authority. Patience, mon ami. The locket, the letter, the cry. They are threads, yes, but the lock, it is the knot that binds them. We must untie it with care. Let us consider the sequence. Eleanor writes her letter. She is troubled. She lets someone in. A cry is heard, muffled as Mary tells us. Then silence, and the door is locked. The locket is broken, its portrait torn. This is not a crime of impulse, Hastings. It is a performance, planned with precision. He crossed to the desk, picking up the letter once more. The smudged ink, the abrupt end. It spoke of a moment interrupted, a heart laid bare before it was silenced. This letter, Poirot mused, it was to someone close, someone who stirred her to despair. Richard, perhaps, with his secret meetings at the Black Swan? Or another, whose shadow we have not yet seen? Hastings stopped pacing, his eyes brightening with a sudden thought. What if the letter was to Beatrice? They argued about the estate, didn't they? Maybe Eleanor was refusing to sell, and Beatrice snapped. Poirot nodded, considering the idea. Possible, Hastings, but Beatrice's ambition, it is cold, calculating. Strangulation, it is a crime of passion, of intimacy. The locket's destruction, too, speaks of personal betrayal, not financial gain. Yet we must not dismiss her entirely. He returned to the door, testing the bolt once more, his mind racing through possibilities. The mechanics of the lock, he said, almost to himself. They are simple, but the human heart is not. The killer knew Eleanor's habits, her late-night writing, her trust. They entered, they killed, they locked the door. But how? Not with a string, not with a tool. With knowledge, Hastings. Knowledge of this house, this room, this woman. He paused, his gaze distant, as if seeing the crime unfold in his mind's eye. Come, he said abruptly. We must examine the servants' staircase. Mary heard the cry from the kitchen, far from the main stairs. Perhaps there is another path, one less traveled. They left the bedroom, descending to the ground floor and following a narrow corridor to the servants' staircase, a steep, unadorned passage tucked behind a panel in the back hall. The stairs creaked under their weight, their treads worn from years of quiet footsteps. At the top, a small landing led to a door opening onto the second-floor corridor, just steps from Eleanor's room. Poirot examined the door, noting its simple latch, easily opened from either side. This, he said, is a path for those who move unseen. A servant, perhaps, or one who knows the house's secrets. If the killer used this stair, they could have reached Eleanor's room without passing the main hall. Hastings' eyes widened. Mary, then? Or someone pretending to be a servant? Poirot shook his head. Mary's fear, it is genuine, but her knowledge of this stair, it is a possibility. Yet I think our killer is bolder, more intimate with Eleanor. Richard, Beatrice, both know this house well. And Clara Marsden, if she exists, may know more than we suspect. As they returned to the main corridor, the manor's silence seemed to press against them, its walls holding secrets yet to be uncovered. Poirot's mind was a whirl of connections, the locket's broken filigree, the letter's smudged ink, the cry in the night, the bolt's unyielding brass. The mechanics of the lock were clear, but the mechanics of motive were still shrouded in shadow. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice resolute, "we must press harder. The lover's secret, the cousin's ambition, the maid's fear, they converge on this locked room. Tomorrow we shall confront Monsieur Langley again, and we shall find this Clara Marsden. The truth, it is close, and the lock, it will yield." Chapter 8. A Hidden Affair. The night had fallen over Ashbourne Manor like a velvet curtain, the moon casting silvery beams through the leaded windows of the drawing-room, where Hercule Poirot sat in quiet contemplation. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to glowing embers, its warmth a faint counterpoint to the chill that permeated the house. Captain Hastings had retired early, exhausted by the day's pursuits, but Poirot's little gray cells were far from rest. The puzzle of the locked room, the broken locket, and the tangled motives of the suspects swirled in his mind, demanding resolution. He had sent Hastings to the village earlier that afternoon to pursue leads on Clara Marsden, the enigmatic figure in Richard Langley's alibi, and now awaited his return with the patience of a cat at a mousehole. The clock on the mantel struck 10, its chime echoing through the silent corridors, when the door opened with a soft creak. Hastings entered, his overcoat dusted with the evening mist, his face alight with the satisfaction of discovery. "Poirot, you were right to send me," he said, sinking into a chair and warming his hands by the fire. The Black Swan innkeeper wasn't keen to talk at first, but a bit of persistence paid off. "Clara Marsden, she's real, all right, and she's been meeting Richard for weeks, late nights, private rooms." The innkeeper described her. Dark hair, sharp features, a widow from London with a taste for poetry and discretion. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the firelight, his mustache curving in a subtle smile. "Excellent, mon ami. So the lover's secret is confirmed, an affair hidden from Lady Eleanor's eyes. But secrets, they have a way of revealing themselves, non? And when they do, they can be fatal." Hastings nodded, leaning forward. The innkeeper said they argued once, loudly enough to be overheard. Something about ending it and Eleanor finding out. "Sounds like Eleanor suspected, just as you thought." "Suspected, oui," Poirot murmured, rising to pace the room, his movements precise and measured. "And suspicion, it festers like a wound. The unfinished letter, the cry in the night, it all points to a confrontation. We must confront Monsieur Langley with this knowledge. Tomorrow, at first light." The following morning dawned crisp and clear, the mist burned away by a reluctant sun. Poirot and Hastings found Richard in the conservatory, a glass-walled annex filled with exotic plants and the humid scent of orchids. He stood by a fountain, idly tracing the leaves of a fern, his face drawn and shadowed, as if sleep had eluded him. "Monsieur Langley," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the humid air like a knife. "We have news from the village. Clara Marsden, she is no mere literary acquaintance, non? An affair, monsieur, conducted in the shadows of the Black Swan. Did Lady Eleanor discover this betrayal?" Richard whirled, his blue eyes widening in alarm, the color draining from his cheeks. How did you learn of Clara?" "It's not what you think, Mr. Poirot. She's a friend, nothing more. We met to discuss work, to escape the pressures here." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. "A friend who calls you darling, who shares private rooms and heated arguments?" "No, monsieur. The innkeeper's ears are keen, and his memory sharp. You were seen embracing her, whispering secrets. And Eleanor, she confronted you. did she not? The argument yesterday evening. The letter she began. My dearest, I cannot go on like this. It was to you, accusing you of this hidden affair. Richard's hands trembled, and he gripped the edge of the fountain for support, water trickling softly in the background like a mocking accompaniment. She suspected, yes, he admitted, his voice breaking. Eleanor had heard rumors, seen letters perhaps. We argued. She wanted me to end it with Clara, to prove my love. But Clara, she understands me, my work, in ways Eleanor never could. It wasn't love, not like with Eleanor. It was escape. Escape, Poirot repeated, his tone laced with irony. A convenient word for betrayal. And when Eleanor threatened to expose you, to cast you out without her fortune, what then? Did passion turn to violence? Did you go to her room, strangle her in a fit of rage, and break the locket to destroy the evidence of your bond? No, Richard cried, his voice echoing off the glass walls. I swear it, Mr. Poirot. I didn't kill her. Yes, we argued, but I left her, alive. I went to the garden to clear my head, as I told you. Clara means nothing compared to Eleanor. I was going to end it, that very night. Poirot's expression remained impassive, though his mind catalogued every flicker of emotion on the poet's face. Fear, guilt, desperation. Swearing, monsieur, is the refuge of the guilty as much as the innocent. The footprints in the garden, they match your boots. You lingered, watching the house, perhaps steeling yourself for what you had done. Richard shook his head vehemently, his curls disheveled. The footprints could be anyone's. I walked there, yes, but I didn't enter her room. Please, you must believe me. Hastings, who had been silent, interjected with a note of sympathy. It's a tangled web, old chap. But if not you, then who? Beatrice with her schemes, or Mary with her silence? Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. Enough, for now. Monsieur Langley, you will remain under watch. The truth, it approaches, and lies will not shield you. As Richard stormed out, his footsteps fading into the corridor, Poirot turned to Hastings, his eyes thoughtful. He cracks, mon ami, but he does not break. The affair, it is the motive we sought, but the locked room still eludes us. We must find Clara Marsden herself. Her words may confirm or contradict his tale. Hastings nodded, his resolve firm. I'll telegraph London contacts, see if we can locate her. But Poirot, what of Beatrice? That burned letter fragment. Could she have known of the affair, used it to her advantage? Possible, Poirot conceded, moving to the conservatory door, where the garden stretched beyond in orderly rows. But the strangulation, it is intimate, personal. An affair betrayed fits better than ambition thwarted, and the locket, torn to hide his face, perhaps, or their shared portrait. They stepped into the garden, the air fresh with the scent of dew-kissed roses. Poirot paused at the stone bench, crouching to re-examine the footprints, now muddied by the night's moisture, but still discernible. These marks, Hastings, they tell of hesitation, of a man torn between flight and return. Richard's boots match, but so might another's. We must compare them all. Back in the manor they enlisted Constable Grimsby, who arrived with a reluctant air, his notebook at the ready. Boots, sir? I suppose we can check the household's footwear. Poirot nodded crisply. Begin with Monsieur Langley's, then Madame Ashbourne's, and Mademoiselle Jenkins. The earth does not lie. Constable. As Grimsby departed to carry out the task, Poirot and Hastings retired to the library, where the estate ledgers lay open like an accusation. Poirot flipped through them absently, his mind elsewhere. The hidden affair, Hastings. It illuminates the shadows. Eleanor's trust shattered, her cry muffled in the night. But the killer locked the door to seal the secret, not just the room. Hastings pondered this, staring at the fireplace where Beatrice's burned note had been found. If Richard did it, he's cleverer than he seems. But Clara, finding her, could be the key. Oui, Poirot agreed, his voice resolute. The affair is hidden no longer, but its consequences linger. Tomorrow, we press on. The truth, mon ami, is a light that banishes all shadows. The manor settled into evening once more, its secrets stirring in the dark, as Poirot's relentless pursuit drew ever closer to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 9. The Locket's Tale. The morning of the third day at Ashbourne Manor dawned crisp and clear, the mist that had cloaked the estate finally lifting to reveal a sky of unblemished blue. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, the broken ebony locket resting on the mahogany desk before him like a dark jewel. Its cracked surface and twisted chain caught the sunlight, casting jagged shadows that seemed to dance with secrets. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, hovered nearby, his face a mixture of curiosity and impatience as he watched Poirot's meticulous examination. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a soft cadence in the quiet room. "This locket, it is more than a trinket. It is a silent witness to Lady Eleanor's final moments. Why was it broken? Why was its portrait torn? These questions, they lead us to the heart of the crime." Hastings leaned closer, squinting at the locket's damaged filigree. "It's a fine piece, Poirot, but it's ruined now. Do you think the killer smashed it to hide the portrait inside? Richard said it was of him and Eleanor, but half is missing." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his fingers delicately lifting the locket to inspect its sprung hinges. "Oui, Hastings, the portrait is key. Half remains. Eleanor's face, perhaps, though the tear obscures it. The other half, taken or destroyed, holds a truth the killer feared. But let us examine this locket closely, for it speaks when others are silent." He produced a small magnifying glass from his pocket, its lens catching the light as he peered at the locket's interior. The torn portrait, no larger than a thumbnail, showed a fragment of auburn hair and a delicate cheekbone, unmistakably Eleanor's. The tear was clean, as if made with a blade or a steady hand, not the jagged rip of a struggle. The chain, too, was twisted in a peculiar way, its links bent as if gripped with force. "This was no accident," Poirot murmured, his voice low with conviction. "The locket was broken deliberately, not in the act of strangulation, but after. See the chain, Hastings. Its twist is unnatural, as if wrenched in a moment of rage or panic. The killer sought to destroy what it contained. But why?" Hastings frowned, his practical mind grappling with the puzzle. If it was Richard's portrait, maybe he broke it to hide his affair with Clara Marsden. Eleanor might have confronted him, shown him the locket as proof of her love, and he snapped. Poirot nodded, considering the theory. "Possible, mon ami, but not certain. Richard's affair, it is a shadow across this case, yet the locket's destruction feels personal, intimate. If it held his image, why not take the whole locket? Why leave half the portrait behind?" He set the locket down, moving to the desk where Eleanor's unfinished letter still lay, its smudged ink a haunting echo of her final thoughts. "My dearest, I cannot go on like this." Poirot traced the words with a gloved finger, his mind weaving connections. "This letter," he said, "it was written in haste, in despair. To whom? Richard, whose betrayal she suspected, or another whose presence we have not yet uncovered. Hastings paced, his boots scuffing the polished floor. What about Beatrice? That burned note you found in the library must sell. No other way. It shows she was desperate to save the estate. Maybe Eleanor refused to sell, and Beatrice took matters into her own hands. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mental gears turning. Beatrice's ambition. It is a motive, oui, but strangulation. It is a crime of passion, not calculation. The locket's tale points to a heart betrayed, not a ledger balanced, yet we must not dismiss her entirely. He returned to the locket, holding it to the light once more. The crack in its ebony surface was deep, splitting the filigree like a wound. Poirot's magnifying glass revealed a tiny scratch near the hinge, barely visible, as if a tool had been used to pry it open. "Curious," he said, his voice sharp with discovery. "This scratch, it suggests force, but precision. The killer opened the locket, tore the portrait, then broke it to obscure their act. But they were hurried, careless. They left half behind." Hastings' eyes widened. So it wasn't just rage? They were trying to hide something specific? "Précisément," Poirot said, slipping the locket back into its evidence envelope. "The locket's tale is one of concealment, but it is not silent. It tells us the killer knew its contents and feared their revelation. We must learn what that portrait held. Richard's face, Clara Marsden's, or another's." The library door opened, and Constable Grimsby entered, his notebook clutched like a talisman. "Mr. Poirot, sir, I've news from the village. No trace of this Clara Marsden yet, but the telegraph office says a message was sent to London 2 days ago from Mr. Langley, addressed to a C. Marsden. No replies come back." Poirot's eyes sparkled. "A message, you say? Most interesting. What did it say, Constable?" Grimsby flushed, flipping through his notebook. "They wouldn't show me the exact words, sir. Confidential, they said, but it was short, sent the morning before Lady Eleanor's death." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A message to Clara, on the eve of murder. Perhaps a warning, a plea, or a plan. We must find this woman, Hastings. She is a shadow, but shadows have substance when the light is right. Hastings, eager for action, straightened. "I'll go back to the telegraph office, see if I can charm the clerk into sharing more. Maybe there's a return address. Discreetly, mon ami," Poirot cautioned, his voice firm. "The killer watches, and we must not startle them. In the meantime, I shall revisit the servants' staircase. The scuff mark we found, it may tell us more of the killer's path." They parted, Hastings heading to the village, while Poirot ascended the narrow servants' staircase once more. The dim passage was unchanged, its worn treads and peeling paint a silent witness to the manor's unseen movements. At the landing near Eleanor's room, Poirot knelt, his magnifying glass sweeping over the scuff mark he had noted before. It was faint, a mere smudge of dirt, but its shape suggested a shoe, a man's, perhaps, or a woman's, with a sturdy heel. "This mark," Poirot murmured, "it is fresh from the night of the crime. Someone passed this way, swiftly, silently. Not Mary, who was in the kitchen, not Beatrice, who claims the library. Richard, perhaps, or another who knows this house's secrets." He descended, his thoughts circling back to the locket. Its tale was incomplete, but its clues, the torn portrait, the twisted chain, the precise crack, pointed to a deliberate act, a desperate need to hide a truth. Poirot's little gray cells buzzed with connections, weaving the locket's story into the broader tapestry of the case. The lover's affair, the cousin's ambition, the maid's fear, the locked door. As he reached the hall, the portrait of Eleanor caught his eye, her painted smile a stark contrast to the tragedy that had befallen her. "Your locket, mademoiselle," Poirot whispered. "It speaks, and I listen. The truth, it is near, and Hercule Poirot will not rest until it is found." Chapter 10. The Night's Truth. The drawing-room of Ashbourne Manor glowed under the soft light of its chandelier, the crystals casting prisms across the tapestries and polished furniture. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the room itself sensed the climax of the drama unfolding within its walls. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, immaculate figure commanding the space with an authority that belied his stature. His hands were clasped behind his back, his green eyes sharp as they surveyed the assembled household, Richard Langley, Beatrice Ashbourne, and Mary Jenkins, seated in a tense semicircle before him. Captain Hastings stood by the fireplace, his honest face alight with curiosity, while Constable Grimsby hovered near the door, his notebook poised for the revelations to come. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "we are gathered to unravel the truth of Lady Eleanor Ashbourne's death. A young woman, vibrant and loved, was taken from this world in a locked room, her hand clutching a broken locket, her heart silenced by a betrayal. The truth, it is hidden in shadows, but the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot, they have brought it to light." Richard shifted uncomfortably, his poet's eyes darting to the floor. Beatrice sat rigid, her hands folded tightly, her expression a mask of controlled disdain. Mary, trembling, clutched her handkerchief, her gaze fixed on Poirot, as if he were both savior and judge. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes silent on the rug. "Let us begin with the scene. A room, bolted from within, a key on the bedside table, windows latched, a chimney too narrow for passage. An impossible crime, some might say, but impossibility is merely a challenge to reason. Eleanor let her killer in, trusted them, opened her door in the quiet of midnight. A cry was heard, muffled, as Mademoiselle Jenkins has told us. Then silence, and the locket, broken, its portrait torn." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the trio. "Each of you has a part in this drama. Madame Ashbourne, your ambition for this estate burned brightly, did it not? The burned note in the library must sell. No other way. It spoke of your desperation to preserve the Ashbourne legacy, a legacy you would inherit with Eleanor's death." Beatrice's lips thinned, but she met his eyes. "I told you, Mr. Poirot, I sought only to save this estate. I had no hand in Eleanor's death." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps, madame. Your ambition, it is cold, calculated, but strangulation, it is a crime of passion. We shall see." He turned to Mary, his voice softening. "Mademoiselle Jenkins, your fear kept you silent, but you heard the cry. We? A muffled sound, past midnight, from Eleanor's room. You did not act, but your honesty has helped us. Your role, it is not that of the killer, but of the witness who feared to speak." Mary's tears spilled over, her voice a whisper. "I'm sorry, sir. I should have done something, but I was so afraid." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture reassuring. "Fear, mademoiselle. It is human. You have spoken now, and that is enough." His gaze settled on Richard, whose hands clenched the arms of his chair. "Monsieur Langley, you are the lover, the poet, the man who gave Eleanor the locket she cherished. But you hid a secret, did you not? An affair, with a woman called Clara Marsden, conducted in the shadows of the Black Swan Inn. Eleanor suspected, confronted you, and in that confrontation, a tragedy unfolded. Richard's face drained of color, his voice hoarse. "No, Mr. Poirot, you're wrong. I loved Eleanor. I'd never hurt her." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice cutting like a blade. "Love, monsieur, it can wound as deeply as hate. Let us reconstruct the night's truth." Eleanor, troubled, wrote a letter. "My dearest, I cannot go on like this. To you, her betrayer. She invited you to her room, perhaps to plead, to accuse. You entered through the main door or the servant's stair, which you knew well from your time in this house. She trusted you, let you close. And then, in a moment of passion, you acted." Richard shook his head, his eyes wild. "No, I was in the garden, I told you." Poirot continued, undeterred. "The strangulation, it was swift, silent, as the coroner confirmed. No struggle, for Eleanor did not expect your rage. But the locket, monsieur, it betrayed you. It held a portrait of you and Eleanor, a symbol of your love. When she confronted you, perhaps she clutched it, a reminder of your vows. In your panic, you tore the portrait, broke the locket to obscure your image, but you were hasty. Half remained, and the chain, twisted by your hands, bore the mark of your force. Beatrice gasped, her composure cracking, while Mary sobbed softly. Richard stood, his voice breaking. "You're inventing this." "I didn't touch her. I was in the garden, writing." Poirot's voice rose, a crescendo of certainty. "The garden, monsieur? The footprints we found, they match your boots, the uneven heel, the size 10. You lingered by the stone bench, watching the house, perhaps planning your moment. The servant's stare, it offered a path unseen, and you used it, did you not? You entered her room, you killed her, and you locked the door behind you, leaving the key to create the illusion of an impossible crime." Richard collapsed back into his chair, his hands covering his face. "No, no." Poirot stepped closer, his presence commanding. "The telegraph to Clara Marsden, sent the morning before the murder. It was a warning, was it not? You feared Eleanor would expose your affair, ruin your future. You acted to silence her, to protect your secret. The locket's destruction was your final act, a desperate attempt to erase the evidence of your betrayal." The room fell silent, the only sound Mary's stifled sobs and the crackle of the fire. Grimsby, his pencil trembling, scribbled furiously. Hastings, wide-eyed, leaned forward. "Good Lord, Poirot, you've got him." Richard's hands fell, his face a mask of despair. "I didn't mean to," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She found out about Clara. She was going to leave me, tell everyone, ruin me. We argued, and I lost control. I grabbed her just to stop her shouting, and then she was gone. The locket, it was in her hand, mocking me. I tore it, broke it, but I couldn't take it all." Poirot's expression was somber, his voice low. "Passion, monsieur. It is a flame that consumes reason. You killed the woman you claimed to love, and for what? A secret that could not be kept." Grimsby stepped forward, his voice unsteady. "Mr. Langley, you're under arrest for the murder of Lady Eleanor Ashbourne." As Richard was led away, his head bowed, Beatrice rose, her face pale but resolute. "I should have seen it," she said, her voice tight. Eleanor's recklessness, her trust in him, it cost her everything. I'll ensure the estate honors her memory." Mary, still weeping, nodded. "I'll speak true from now on, sir." For her, Poirot watched them go, his heart heavy but his mind clear. "The night's truth, Hastings," he said softly. "It is a bitter one, but it is done. The locket's tale is told, and justice it will follow." Chapter 11. The Confession. The air in Ashbourne Manor seemed to lighten with Richard Langley's arrest, as if the house itself exhaled a long-held breath. The grand hall, with its towering portraits and gleaming chandelier, was bathed in the soft glow of early evening, but the atmosphere remained heavy with the aftershock of truth. Hercule Poirot stood near the grand staircase, his immaculate figure framed by the carved balustrade, his hands clasped behind his back. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, hovered nearby, his face a mixture of triumph and unease as he processed the day's revelations. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a quiet melody in the stillness. "The puzzle is nearly complete, but the confession, it is the final piece that sets the picture aright. Monsieur Langley has spoken, but we must ensure his words hold the full truth." Hastings nodded, his brow furrowed. "He admitted it, Poirot, strangling Eleanor in a moment of panic. It's ghastly, but it fits. The locket, the letter, the footprints, everything points to him. Do you think there's more to it?" Poirot's green eyes twinkled, a flicker of caution beneath his calm. "The truth, Hastings. It is like a diamond, brilliant, but with facets yet to be examined. Let us hear Monsieur Langley once more, to confirm the details of his crime." They found Richard in the Manor's small study, a dimly lit room with heavy drapes and a single desk, where Constable Grimsby had stationed him under guard. Richard sat slumped in a chair, his poet's charm extinguished, his dark curls plastered to his forehead with sweat. His hands, cuffed by Grimsby's orders, trembled as he looked up, his blue eyes hollow with despair. "Monsieur Langley," Poirot began, settling into a chair opposite him, "you have confessed to the murder of Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, a crime born of passion and betrayal. But the little gray cells, they demand clarity. Tell us, in your own words, the events of that fatal night." Richard's voice was barely above a whisper, raw with emotion. "I didn't mean to kill her, Mr. Poirot. You have to believe that. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. "A mistake, monsieur?" "Strangulation. It is not an accident. Begin at the beginning, if you please." Richard drew a shuddering breath, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Eleanor and I, we were in love, but lately she'd changed. She was distant, suspicious. She'd heard rumors about me and Clara Marsden, the woman I met at the Black Swan. It wasn't what Eleanor thought. Clara was a friend, a poet, but yes, we grew close. Too close. Eleanor found a note from Clara in my coat, a foolish thing I'd kept. She confronted me that evening in the garden. She was furious, said she'd tell everyone, ruin me. I begged her to listen, but she stormed off. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his keen interest. "And later, monsieur? You followed her to her room. We?" Richard nodded, his hands clenching. "I couldn't let it end like that. I went to her room around midnight. She let me in. She always did, even when we fought. She was at her desk, writing that letter you found. She showed it to me, said she couldn't live with my lies. I tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen. She clutched that locket, the one I gave her, like it was proof of my betrayal. We argued, and I grabbed her just to make her stop shouting. My hands were on her throat, and then she went limp. I didn't mean to kill her, I swear." Hastings, standing by the door, let out a low whistle. "Good Lord, Richard, you strangled her in a fit of rage. And the locket, why break it?" Richard's voice broke, tears streaming down his face. It was hers, a gift from me, with our picture inside. When she fell, it was in her hand, taunting me. I panicked, tore the portrait, smashed the locket to hide it. I thought if no one saw the picture, they wouldn't know it was me. I locked the door with her key, left it on the table, and slipped out through the servants' stair. I knew the house well. Eleanor showed me that passage once, as a joke. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind cataloguing every word. The servants' stair, monsieur. A clever choice, but not clever enough. The scuff mark we found, it matches your boots, as do the footprints in the garden. You lingered there, planning your act, no? Richard shook his head, his voice desperate. I wasn't planning to kill her. I just wanted to talk, to make her understand. It all happened so fast. Poirot leaned back, his expression somber. Fast, monsieur, but fatal. You betrayed her trust, her love, and when she threatened to expose you, you silenced her. The locket, it was not just a symbol. It was evidence of your guilt, and you sought to destroy it. But the truth, it is not so easily broken. Grimsby, scribbling furiously, looked up. That's enough for me, Mr. Poirot. He's confessed. Motive, means, opportunity. I'll take him to the station. Poirot raised a hand, his voice firm. One moment, Constable. Monsieur Langley, this Clara Marsden. Where is she now? Your telegram, sent the morning before the murder. What did it say? Richard's eyes darted away, his voice faltering. I told her to stay away, that Eleanor knew. I didn't want her involved. She's in London, I think. I don't know where Poirot's gaze was piercing. You think, monsieur? Or you know, and choose to hide her. No matter. We shall find her, and she will confirm or deny your tale. As Grimsby led Richard away, his cuffs clinking softly, the manor seemed to settle into a mournful silence. Hastings turned to Poirot, his face troubled. It's over, isn't it? He confessed, Poirot. The case is solved. Poirot's smile was faint, tinged with melancholy. Solved, Hastings, but not finished. The confession, it is the truth, but not all truths are complete. Clara Marsden, she is a shadow we must still chase. And Eleanor's letter, its despair, it haunts me. Was it only for Richard, or is there more we have not seen? They stepped into the hall where Beatrice Ashbourne awaited, her black dress stark against the marble floor. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a resolve that had not been there before. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice steady. Is it true? Richard killed her? Poirot nodded, his expression grave. Oui, madame. He has confessed. A crime of passion, born of a hidden affair. But you must now carry the burden of this estate. Will you honor Eleanor's memory? Beatrice's lips tightened, but she nodded. I will. She was foolish, but she was family. I'll ensure Ashbourne Manor endures, for her Poirot turned to Mary Jenkins, who had appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. And you, mademoiselle, your silence nearly cost us the truth. Will you speak now, always, when justice demands it? Mary nodded, her voice choked. I will, sir. For Lady Eleanor, I'll never stay quiet again. As Beatrice and Mary departed, their footsteps fading into the manor's depths, Poirot gazed at the portrait of Eleanor above the staircase, her painted eyes serene yet sorrowful. Your justice, mademoiselle, he murmured. It is done. But the heart, it weeps still. Hastings clapped a hand on his shoulder, his voice warm. You've done it again, Poirot. Another puzzle solved, another villain brought to light. Poirot's smile was bittersweet. Oui, Hastings, but the cost of truth, it is always heavy. Come, let us prepare to leave this place. The Locket's tale is told, and Ashbourne Manor must find its peace. Chapter 12. The Little Grey Cells. The morning sun rose over Ashbourne Manor, its golden rays piercing the last wisps of mist that had clung to the Sussex countryside for days. The estate, with its ivy-clad walls and ancient oaks, seemed to breathe anew, as if relieved of the burden of its recent tragedy. Hercule Poirot stood on the gravel drive, his immaculate overcoat buttoned against the crisp autumn air, his hat tilted at a precise angle. Captain Hastings, ever his stalwart companion, adjusted the strap of their luggage, his face reflecting a mix of satisfaction and melancholy as they prepared to depart. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft yet resonant. "The puzzle of the Ebony Locket is solved, the truth laid bare. Yet the heart, it lingers on the cost of such truths, does it not?" Hastings nodded, glancing back at the Manor's towering silhouette. "It's a grim business, Poirot. Richard's confession, Eleanor's death, it all fits, but it leaves a bitter taste. Poor girl, trusting a man like that." Poirot's green eyes twinkled, though his expression remained somber. "Oui, Hastings, the human heart, it is the greatest mystery of all. Love, betrayal, ambition. They weave a tapestry more complex than any lock or key. But with order and method, the little grey cells, they bring clarity to even the darkest threads." They began their walk down the drive, the crunch of gravel underfoot, a steady counterpoint to their conversation. The village of Ashbourne lay ahead, its church spire piercing the sky, and beyond it, the train that would carry them back to London. Poirot's mind, however, was still in the Manor, retracing the steps of the case that had unfolded over these few days. "Let us review, Hastings," he said, his hands clasped behind his back. "Lady Eleanor, she was a woman of passion, trusting too much in the heart of Richard Langley. His affair with Clara Marsden, it was the spark that ignited her despair. Her letter, 'My dearest, I cannot go on like this,' it was a cry to him, a plea for truth. But truth, it came too late, and in her room, in the intimacy of midnight, he silenced her." Hastings shook his head, his voice tinged with indignation. "And that locket, Poirot, the way he broke it, tore the portrait to hide his guilt. It's monstrous to destroy something she cherished like that." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "The locket, it was the key, mon ami. Its destruction was not mere rage, but a calculated act to obscure his betrayal. Yet he was careless, leaving half the portrait behind, the chain twisted by his hands. The footprints in the garden, the scuff on the servant's stair. They betrayed his path, as did Mary's muffled cry, heard in the night. They paused at the gate, where the Manor's wrought-iron crest gleamed in the sunlight. Hastings glanced back, his eyes lingering on the windows of Eleanor's room. What about Beatrice and Mary? They'll carry this with them, won't they? Beatrice with her estate, Mary with her guilt for staying silent. "Oui," Poirot said, his tone gentle. "Madame Ashbourne, she will guard the Manor's legacy, perhaps with more heart now, knowing the cost of ambition. Mademoiselle Jenkins, her fear kept her silent, but her courage in speaking has freed her. They will heal Hastings, as the living must." A car approached, its engine rumbling softly, sent by the village station to collect them. As they climbed in, Poirot's gaze lingered on the Manor, its stones now bathed in light. "This case," he said, almost to himself, "it reminds us that the locked room, it is not just a door or a bolt. It is the heart, locked by trust, opened by betrayal. Richard Langley, he could not bear the truth of his own actions, and so he locked Eleanor in death. Hastings leaned back, his face thoughtful. "You saw it all, Poirot. The locket, the letter, the footprints. I don't know how you do it, old chap. Those little gray cells of yours, they're sharper than a razor." Poirot's smile was modest, but his eyes sparkled with quiet pride. "The little gray cells, Hastings, they are but servants of order and method. They observe, they connect, they reason. The locket's tale, the cry in the night, the lover's secret, they were pieces of a mosaic, and with patience, the picture emerged." As the car rolled through the village, past the Black Swan Inn, where Richard's affair had cast its shadow, Poirot's thoughts turned to Clara Marsden, the elusive poetess who had vanished into London's sprawl. "We may yet find Mademoiselle Marsden," he said, "to confirm the final details. But her role, it is secondary now. The truth of Richard's guilt, it is certain." The train station came into view, its platform bustling with villagers and travelers. Poirot adjusted his hat, his posture as precise as ever. "Ashbourne Manor, it will stand, Hastings, as will justice. Eleanor's memory, it is honored by the truth we have uncovered." Hastings clapped him on the shoulder, his voice warm. "Another triumph, Poirot. You've done her proud." Poirot's smile was bittersweet as they boarded the train, the whistle sounding a mournful note. "Triumph, mon ami, is a quiet thing when it comes at such a cost. But the little gray cells, they do not rest until the truth is served." As the train pulled away, carrying them from the village and its secrets, Poirot gazed out the window, the countryside blurring past. The Ebony Locket's mystery was resolved, its broken pieces a testament to a love betrayed and a justice won. And in the heart of Hercule Poirot, the little gray cells rested, ready for the next puzzle to unfold.